Hello, everyone. I'm Charles Vinick, Executive Director of the Whale Sanctuary Project, and I want to take this time to welcome you to our conversation with Jean-Michel Cousteau. The way we're going to do this is Jean-Michel and I will have a conversation for probably 30 minutes. We'll show you some videos, we'll show you some pictures, and then certainly we'll welcome your questions for around another 30 minutes. I've had the privilege of working with Jean-Michel and his family for some 40 years. And I have to say that there's rarely been a dull moment. It's been a wonderful time. We've had the opportunity to collaborate on many projects, and we'll talk about a few of those today. Now, were I to do a complete introduction of Jean-Michel, we would take up the full 30 minutes of our discussion and have little time for conversation beyond. But let me just tell you a little bit about him. He's produced more than 80 films. He's received the Emmy Award, the Peabody Award, the Set d'Or Award, which is the French equivalent of the Emmy, and also the Cable Ace Award. He's the first person who was ever invited to represent the environment in the opening ceremonies of the Olympics in 2002. He's received more awards for his work in the environment, for diving and the like, than I could possibly mention. He was named as an environmental hero by then Vice President Al Gore in 1998. He's known as an explorer, an environmentalist, an educator, and a film producer. I actually know him as a very vibrant voice for the ocean and as my good friend. Jean-Michel?
Well, thank you, Charles. It's a little bit embarrassing. I wish we were in the same building or in the same house, but unfortunately, with what's happening, we have to put up with it. And your contribution for decades that you have made, and very quietly, you became, in my opinion, an expert when it comes to the need to do everything we can to protect marine mammals, because they are, as I've said very often, at the end of the food chain in the ocean, and just like we are at the end of the food chain on land. And so I thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you very much. Well, let's jump right into it. Jean-Michel, this year you're celebrating 75 years of diving.
Yeah.
So let's kind of go back to some of those early days and show a little bit about what that was like.
Well, I was a kid. I was 5, 6, and my parents got involved in the people who were going fishing and spearfishing, and my father wanted to hold his breath as long as people who could do it better than he did. And that's when he co-invented the diving equipment, the regulators. And one day he said, well, Jean-Michel, do you want to try? And I was 7, and my mother was diving. And he told my brother, my late brother, and the 4 of us, we went diving. And I started diving. I was in the ocean or in the water all the time before that as a kid. I had a mask and I wanted to see what was going on. So it's been an immense privilege for me to start as a kid. And of course, I was making mistakes, which today we're telling people not to make, because I didn't know then. Now I know, of course, much better than I used to. So between that and the team of my father, I've been able to explore and explore and explore. And that's why I will never stop diving as long as I can. And this year, I'm celebrating 75 years of scuba diving.
And Jean-Michel, when you were diving as a youngster, and your mother was with you, what was her role in all of those dives?
Well, it's amazing because at the very, very beginning, when we were in shallow water, I wanted to talk to my brother about what we were looking at and discovering and so on. And she kept putting the mouthpiece back in my mouth to make sure that I would not drown. And she was an amazing lady and a very important person in the entire life of my father and his team. And that's why in France they call it la bergère, which means the sheep keeper. And she was keeping an eye on everybody all the time, and spent more time on board Calypso than my father, my brother, and myself together. That was her home.
And then in 1972, we're moving through history somewhat quickly, but in 1972, your brother, your father, and you created the Cousteau Society. Why did you move from what you'd been doing to creating a nonprofit environmental group?
Well, my father had no money, and he always had to find ways to be able to fulfill his dreams together with his team that was getting bigger and bigger. So we created that company, a not-for-profit organization at the time. And fortunately, a lot of people who helped what my father was doing was supporting us financially. And this is what we're still doing today. After the company that I was working with, I left it and I created, when my brother and my father passed away, I decided to continue his philosophy. And I'm glad that together with what you're doing and representing today, we are able to help a lot of what it's all about, and that is to protect the ocean, to protect not just the whale, but to protect ourselves. And
let's
so,
take a look at that and show
yeah.
a little film and talk a little bit about exactly what you're referring to.
Well, I think it's a dream.
Well, 1 second, we got one little technical glitch. There we go.
Yeah.
We must connect the ocean to the existence of every human being. This is the only way for people to understand that the quality of each and every one of our lives depend on water, depends on the ocean. My father said, people protect what they love. And so we want more people to fall in love with water, with the ocean. And I say, protect the ocean and you protect yourself.
Well, the message is still going on. It's not changing, and more than ever today, because as we add another 100 million people to the planet every year, the pressure on the water system, which we all depend upon, no water, no life, every plant, every animal, everything, every creatures need that water. And unfortunately, when it comes to the ocean, we're dumping all kinds of garbage and more things that we don't ever see, like chemicals and heavy metals. And that is affecting everything in the ocean. So fortunately today we can reach out and sit down with decision makers, industries or government, and we can make much, much better decisions than we have made in the past, including myself. So I think we are heading in the right direction.
Very good. Now, it would be really almost impossible to talk about your history and Jeek's history without talking a little bit about Calypso. So let me just bring up a picture of the ship and talk for a moment about Calypso. When did you first go on Calypso? What was the first time you went on the ship, and what do you remember about it?
I think it was in 1952 or 53. I went, spent 3-4 months a year, all the holidays and vacations and summer and so on. My brother and I, we would be flown, and you know, it wasn't easy in those days, but we were being flown wherever the ship was. And communication was very difficult, unlike what we have today. But my grandmother, my mother's mother, organizing all of that for us to come out of school where we were going and being sent to wherever Calypso was. There were 23 people on the ship working and making all kinds of filming everywhere. And it just went on until the 80s, the early 80s. I remember when Ted Turner started helping us, and we were making films about the Amazon. It never ends. It was a very important vessel. It was our home away from home.
You mentioned earlier that your mother was on board more than you, your brother, and your father combined. And I know that whenever Jacques Cousteau would ask me to go on the ship, I would always send your mother a telex. And I would ask her if it was a good time to come, even though the captain, the commandant, had already asked me to go. I would always check with her, and I would ask which cabin she'd want me in and the like, because in many respects, she was in charge on board that ship.
She has been always in charge. And I'm glad to hear what you're saying, because it's not only true, but she was making all those decisions. And of course, my father was getting all the credit for it, but so his team, but she was the boss on board the ship, and everybody loved her. When they had problems, they would literally sit down with her and express their problem, whether it was on the ship or their family or whatever. She was loved by many, many people, including some people who are still alive today, who have retired a long time ago, but they're still there.
Well, I know that many people don't realize that Calypso was a minesweeper built in World War II for the British Navy. And I think under your father's captaincy, it traveled over 1 million miles, and it was never even intended to go out in the ocean. It was really a minesweeper to be in port.
That's right. And it was built in Oregon, and from the wood of Oregon, and up in south of Seattle. And they built several of them for the British Navy. And some of them were in the Mediterranean Sea. And after the war, the Second World War, they didn't know what to do with it. So the local people used them to carry cars and people from islands to the mainland and so on. And they were, that I know of, there were 3 or 4 vessels which were identical, and all of them were being called Calypso. And it was Calypso 1, 2, and 3. And Calypso, our Calypso, was number 3. And we've never changed the name.
Yeah, it's interesting. Almost everyone would think you had given the name to the ship, but it came with it.
No, we didn't.
My first time spending any real time on Calypso was when we left for the first set of Amazon expeditions. So let me jump to a little picture of that. So here you see the 3 of us, and I think just one thing I want to point out, we're on the stern of Calypso.
Do I recognize you? Do I recognize you there?
Well, the interesting thing about this, what it proves is if you work with your family long enough, your hair turns white.
I think it's great.
So this is in really 1981 in Norfolk, Virginia. We spent a very rainy, cold day getting the ship ready to leave for the Amazon. And the reason I mention it here, it's fun to show the picture, of course, but also in many respects, that expedition in the early 80s, where we did 7 hours of television in the Amazon on that first expedition, and then you went back 20 years, 30 years later as well. But the first 7 hours, in many ways, was the introduction to the world through television of climate change, because we saw what was happening in the Amazon rainforest. Now, even then, it was burning, and it's still burning now, all this much time later.
Absolutely.
So
it's affecting every one of us. It's horrible what's happening, and it's destroying not only thousands of acres of trees, which are very important because they are the ones that we depend upon on land as well. And the people who live there, many of them have no identity, no land ownership. They are treated like tapirs and cockroaches. And these people are still there, and many of them are dying. And the disease that we have, COVID-19 right now, has been reaching out over there. It's just horrible what we're doing. And my daughter, Celine, is totally dedicated to trying to help those people.
Let's take a look at one of the short films that you've done about this work and about what's taking place.
Well, I love that place.
Climate change is the greatest challenge in human history. Our collective future depends on a healthy environment. We have the solutions of innovative clean energy. We now need the willingness to put them into action. We owe it to ourselves. We owe it to our water planet. Every day is the perfect opportunity to create the sustainable future. We are the only species on the planet that has the opportunity and the privilege not to disappear.
That's why, for me, now more than ever, we need to make the right decisions. And I think we have the opportunity to do that. It's a very exciting time in our history, but we need to do it because we're already measuring some of the consequences of all the mistakes that we've made in the past, and we know what needs to change and how to do it. And thanks to industries, we can sit down with them. Governments, we can sit down with the leaders. I've done that with W. Bush to create the largest marine protected area on the planet ever, the northwestern Hawaiian island, 1,200 miles. And I'm happy to say that 5 years ago, President Obama went over there to see what President W. Bush had done, and he multiplied what he had done by 4 times. So there's hope. Yes, we can do it. And there are people who want to continue and do even more and more than what we've done so far. I'm a very, very committed and excited, and to help what you're doing, Charles, is very creative, very important, and we need to communicate that to as many people as we can.
And as you give lectures around the world and you get to talk with people of all ages, what gives you the most hope, given how you've seen the environment degrading over so many years in the marine environment?
Education, education, education. We have more and more people who are willing to communicate with young people. And the young people are the ones who will be the much, much better decision makers in the future than we have been. And I think our program, Ambassador of the Environment, with different hotels, the Ritz-Carlton and other places, also with cruise ships, we're able to reach out and literally share a lot of information. How can you protect what you don't understand? And that's something that we've always wanted to do all the time, is to share with the world, with people, just like you do with your foundation in Russia, to make sure we do the right thing. And that's for future generations. And I'm totally convinced that we are doing everything we can. We need to do even more. And we have to keep in mind that every time you lose a species, the system is weakening. Every species is a capital, and you cannot touch the capital. You can only live off the interest produced by the capital. And so we're learning all of this, and education is allowing us to do much better decisions than we have done in the past.
Well, in a moment, we'll talk about some of the work you've done and we've done together with whales. But I just want to remind everyone that there's a Q&A button on your screen. And that pulls up a little panel, and you can write your questions. And in a few moments, Jean-Michel and I will try to respond to some of those questions. But before, I want to talk a little bit about whales, certainly the work that we're doing with the Whale Sanctuary Project, the work we've done together. Now, tell us a little bit about the first time when you were a kid and your father was the head of the museum, the Oceanographic Museum in Monaco, and some of the first introductions you had with dolphins and whales that really have characterized some of the things you've done to protect them ever since.
Well, every morning I was going to school, but I always wanted to go to the Oceanographic Institute before I went to school. And I would go and go behind the aquariums, and I was feeding fish, which I was not supposed to do. And then one day I found out, and I had binoculars, and I saw that the vessel of the Oceanographic Institute was out there capturing dolphins. And they were capturing them and put them in a big Olympic swimming pool in Monaco. And I found out that some of them were not, they were the wrong one, they released them, and others, they were putting them in jail. And one of them was sick, and they decided to take it and bring it to the Oceanographic Institute and put him in a tiny little tank. And I was going to see that young female dolphin every day. And I wanted to know how she was doing. And I would go to the people in charge and said, she is not well. She's having problems. And they would go and check her out and say, no, she's fine. And one day, and that was after maybe 2 or 3 weeks, one day I woke in there and she was dead. And she had swam from one side of the pool to the other and blew her brain on the concrete. She suicided herself. And I have no proof scientifically, but I'm totally convinced that she had been separated as a young female from her baby. And she ultimately suicided herself. I have never forgotten that, and I will never stop trying to help the marine mammals who are in the ocean what we are on land.
And stories like that, I mean, it's a devastating story, and yet as we learn more and more about whales and dolphins in captivity, living in concrete tanks, we learn how they suffer, the stress they're under, the illnesses that come from that stress, how females and their offspring are separated for commercial reasons. And that's the heart and soul behind why those of us who are working with the Whale Sanctuary Project, Lori Marino, who created it, why we're doing what we're doing, to create a sanctuary for those whales and dolphins in captivity, initially a beluga whale sanctuary in Nova Scotia. And that's the reason we're doing it, to give them a better quality of life. So hearing your story, I think, inspires all of us to do more of that. And last year, while working on that, you and I had an opportunity to take an international team to Russia. And so I just want to show a little film about that we made when you came back. And then we'll talk
wonderful
a bit about
teams,
that.
Charles. You put together a wonderful team. Thank you.
I want to send this special video message to my Russian friends. With our international team and my colleague Charles Vinick, I had the great privilege and honor to travel to Russia earlier this year to advise the government of the Russian Federation about the opportunity to release the 10 orcas and 87 belugas that were trapped in the whale jail. Russia showed great leadership, and I'm very pleased that all the orcas and all the belugas have now been freed back into their natural habitat. I congratulate the Russian government and the Russian people on this extraordinary and unprecedented achievement. I wish to say thank you from the bottom of my heart to the Russian leaders who made this happen. Earlier this year, Canada banned keeping, breeding, and trading in cetaceans for entertainment purposes. In the US, there have been no permits issued for a cetacean capture in more than 25 years. In Russia, people have spoken out loudly against the capture of orcas and belugas for entertainment. We need to make sure that the tragic situation of orcas and belugas trapped in the whale jail is never repeated. The time has come to view captivity of whales and dolphins as part of our history, not a tragic part of our future. I now call on all countries to ban the capture of cetaceans for the entertainment industry. We should study and learn about these amazing creatures in the open ocean, in their home, where they belong.
Thank you, Charles.
Well, it was a remarkable experience that I think our whole team had, the Russian members of the team and those who were from the States and New Zealand and elsewhere. So it was a tremendous team that we took. But one of the things that characterized that trip for me was the way in which you have always been able to reach out to world leaders, different parties, people, Democrats, Republicans in this country, leaders around the world who you may disagree with on some things, but you're always willing to talk with them and reach out to them. Talk to us a little bit. Tell us how you're able to do that, even when you don't agree with them.
Well, whether it's government or industries, their responsibility is short-term to either succeed economically or to be re-elected or whatever. So I understand that. But all these people, they have families, they have friends, they have children, and you know what? They have a heart. And so it's an issue of reaching the heart of these people and never, never point a finger. Remember, there are 3 fingers pointing at you. Forget about that. It's an issue of trying to reach their heart and sit down and having a conversation and trying to help them make the bridge between their obligations of their responsibility at the time with the future. And people, the majority of them, they appreciate that. They realize we're not there to criticize or make them change everything. No, it's to help provide better decisions and make better consequences in their responsibility for the future. And that's how I've been able with industries in different parts of the world, whether it was to save the whales in Baja California, when I sat down with President Zedillo, because the big industry wanted to build a place where the gray whales come all the way from Alaska all the way down to reproduce and give birth over there. Well, he made the change. And I've done that with President Bush, as I've mentioned. I've worked with President in France and in other parts of the world, and industries, and sit down with these people. Never, never criticize them. Always try to sit down and communicate with them, their families. They care about their future. And we want to make that bridge and help them as much as we can. And of course, as I've said earlier, education is critical. And it has worked very often, I would say, at least 4 times out of 5 times when I had the opportunity and the privilege of sitting down with those people.
And I think, what we learned in Russia, and certainly while we made many recommendations, some were taken and some were not, but what we saw was that the way people think about whales and the way they thought about those 100 animals that had initially been captured and were captured illegally was changing. And even some of the fishermen who'd been part of the capture were changing in their views. So we're seeing a paradigm shift in many respects around the world about how we treat whales and dolphins, particularly about bringing them into captivity. So it was a privilege to be on that trip with you, to have you leading us, and we're grateful for all the help you provided.
Well, I hope we never stop. There's a lot more to be done, and we need a lot of help to make that happen. And anybody who feels that your foundation can continue doing what I think is critical to do, thank you. And there's a lot that we are looking forward into the future to make happen. And of course, today with the technology that we have, I call it the communication revolution, if you want, where you have 9 billion people on the planet who are connected to each other. And we can provide them with a lot of information which were not available in the past and are becoming more and more available, whether it's for teachers or parents or whatever. They can make much, much better decisions. And we're heading in that direction. And I'm very, very, very excited to say that yes, and our mission at Ocean Futures, if you protect the ocean, you protect yourself. And that's for the 9 billion people we're talking about.
So that's a good segue for me to remind everyone to go to oceanfutures.org or whalesanctuary.org, and you can learn much more about what we're doing in both of these organizations. Jean-Michel serves as an advisor to the Whale Sanctuary Project. I serve as a longtime board member to Ocean Futures. So you get us both no matter where you go. Now let's turn to some of the questions that are coming in. So let me ask the first one. What's your favorite dive?
The next one.
Why do you say that?
Because I'm always excited to find and see and discover something I've never seen before. And although I've been diving for 75 years, every dive I make, I see whether it's behavior or new species, plants or animals, I always see something new. And for me, I'm like a kid. I'm looking forward to it. And then I can make a report and share it with people. And of course, I never dive alone. So I'm always with my better half, Nan, or with many other people who I've been diving with for many, many years, like Dr. Richard Murphy and Charles Vinick is always there. You're not diving, but we report to you a lot of stuff that we done, so you can share it with the people who are reaching out. And so to me, it's so exciting. And, I'm celebrating this year, 75 years of scuba diving. And my plan, because I'm the oldest diver, still diving. And I look forward to when I'm going to be 107 to celebrate 100 years of scuba diving.
And we want to be there to see it.
Yeah, I hope you come.
We've got a question from Emily. What can I do to get involved, especially if I live far from the coast?
If you go where? Far from the coast?
If she lives far from the coast, far from the ocean, what can she do to get involved?
You mean on land or in the ocean?
Well, what can she do to help the environment? How can she help make this a better world, if you will, a better marine environment, even though she's not on the coast?
Well, she can go on your website. She can go on our website, and she can also ask us questions. We'll be glad to help as much as we can. But let's not forget that if you live in the middle of the United States of America, next time you drink a glass of water, you're drinking the ocean. And it's coming from the ocean through the clouds that are creating the rain and the ice and the snow and so on. And if you have a child out there up in the mountain that goes doing skiing, Well, it's skiing on the ocean. And all of that water goes back into the ocean, and it comes back ultimately pure and clean. And that's why we have huge opportunities to capture these waters before they get into the ocean and treat them, millions of new jobs to capture not only all these garbage, plastic, and so on, but also what we never talk about, which is chemicals and heavy metals. And we can capture all of that and recycle it. There is no waste in nature. Everything is part of nature. So we can do it.
I think Emily can be a communicator of all of that. It doesn't matter where she lives or where anyone lives.
Doesn't matter.
It's communicating and educating, as you said earlier.
That's right.
So we've got another question here from Cecilia in Sweden. And she's asking you, Jean-Michel, what's your best memory of your work with Caico, the free willy whale that we had the chance to bring to Iceland and reintroduce to the wild? What's your best memory of that work?
Well, my best memory of Caico, and there are many, many, many stories because we've been with Caico for several years, has been when with Nancy and I, we were on a little boat and we went out in Iceland because Caico was connected with some other whales, and we were hoping that Caico was doing well with the other orcas. And it was a Sunday morning, I will never forget, and about 11 o'clock. And Caico really liked this other group of orcas, and Caico decided goodbye and took off with that school of orcas and went all the way to Norway. Wow, that was so wonderful. I don't know how many years you and many members of our team had spent with orca and with Caico in particular to make sure that Caico, who had been in jail for, I don't know, 20 some years, was going to be released, and he was free.
Right. It was a wonderful time. There were so many experiences like that.
You spend more time with Caico than anybody else that I know of.
Well, I spent a lot. There are a couple of others, certainly many members of the animal care team and the marine operations team were there a lot, but it was over a good 4 or 5 year period that we were in Iceland and back and forth. So it was a remarkable time. And I think in many ways, the work we did there influences and informs what we're now doing with the Whale Sanctuary Project, because we learned about how to do a lot of the infrastructure, a lot of the work, and we learned how difficult it is to put a whale that's been in captivity back in the open ocean to be free, where it has to learn how to live with a family, has to connect with a family. So we learned some tremendous human lessons as well as working with the whale. Here's a question from someone, Jean-Michel. This is from Tracy, who was on Project Ocean Search in 1983. Again in 1987, Project Ocean Search is a field program that Ocean Future Society runs in island locations around the world. And she also visited Parkour Cousteau in Paris, that I had the privilege of being the director of for a number of years, and talks about that. And her question is, would you ever consider starting up something like Parkour Cousteau again?
Absolutely. Yes, of course. No, I'd love to do that. And you know, the fact that we were able to have a blue whale, the size of a blue whale, where people could walk inside and explore and see, oh, that's a female, and here's a baby, and oh, that's the heart, and oh, it was unbelievable. People loved it. And I think we can do that in many parts of the world and make people realize what the biggest creature in the ocean on the planet is sharing with us, because there's a lot of things that are common to us, whether it's communication, breathing, just like we do. I mean, it's just, yeah, I'd love to do that.
Well, I think a lot of people, many people on this webinar may not realize that by training, you're an architect. And in
Well,
the project, when we created Parkour, Jean-Michel Cousteau, while we had architects and designers, the theme of that came from you.
well, but it was I will say it was mostly my father's fault, because when I had to, after I went to college, I had to do my military service, and I went to Madagascar, where I was allowed to go and represent France for 2 years. I designed, because my dream as a kid was to build cities underwater, because my father was diving. And I became an architect. And in Madagascar, I built 6 schools. Hopefully, some of them are still there, a dispensary, and I got involved in many other projects. But every time I had so much, the opportunities, I went diving in many different places, including the island of Mauritius, which has received a disaster just recently with a ship that ran aground, and 800 tons of oil has been released. It's horrible what has happened over there. It was one of the nicest destinations. I remember going diving over there. Very few people, very poor people, totally dependent on the food coming from the ocean. Well, I don't know what's happening today to these people. And if I could, I would want to go and try to see how we can help them. That was for me my dream. But my father one day gave me a call and said, I cannot come to the Indian Ocean because I'm stuck in the Mediterranean Sea, but I want to go around and all the way to South Africa. And I said, fine. And I said, I'll help you because you've never been there. He had never been in that place. And I'd been to the Maldives and all the way around Madagascar diving and so on. So I helped him, and that's how I got so involved in the activity of my father. And I'm glad I did. And I met some wonderful people like Albert Falco and all the people who co-invented the equipment to scuba dive. And those people have made millions and millions of people happy today.
We have a number of questions about whales and the like. So here's a question from Alina, and it deals with, how do you deal with some people's beliefs that captivity is okay, especially when they're not convinced by the scientific evidence or documentaries? How do you deal with people who aren't persuaded by the science that you see?
I'd love to sit down with them. I'd love to, if we cannot sit down together, they can come on our website, they can ask us questions. We can provide them with all kinds of information that is available. And you can do the same thing, Charles, with your foundation. And I think that the people need to know. They're making mistakes because they don't know. But the majority of the people, when they found out, said, oh, I didn't know. Then they want to do the right thing. So never point a finger. Always try to reach the heart. Everybody has one.
And I think in your work, and certainly in ours, and what we've seen together, is young people persuade their parents. Kids persuade their parents. They teach their parents. And kids, almost when they see whales and dolphins, they intrinsically know that they should be free. And they get it right away when they see them in captivity.
That's right.
So in many ways, if the parents aren't seeing it, let's teach their kids, and their kids will teach their parents.
That's why our ambassador programs are for young people. And they are the ones who go back home and say, Dad, Mom, you shouldn't do this, or you shouldn't eat that, or stop using all that plastic, and don't throw all these bottles in the ocean, and on and on. And that's mostly children. And I'm so glad, I love kids.
Now, here's a similar question, same vein. What can we do to stop Norway and Japan from the so-called research they do in capturing marine mammals? How can we deal with those countries?
Well, we should try to reach the decision makers over there and try to help them. And it's not criticizing, but it's trying to educate them and find out how they could benefit by doing things differently than what they're doing now, which is what we were doing 50 years ago or 100 years ago. But that's the past of the history of the human species. We don't do that anymore. And just as you say at through the foundation, if you see a dolphin next to your boat, don't touch it. Don't feed it. Enjoy it. It looks at you, and that's it. And that's called freedom. And it's the same thing with us. If they were able to come on land, they would look at us, try to figure out, and then that's what they do. When they come to see you in the water, they're very curious. They don't come to hurt you. The mistakes that are being made is because the environment is different, whether the water is not clear, well, their primary sense is vision, or the water, or there's blood in the water, well, their primary sense is smell, like some sharks, for example. And if they can't see anything, they make mistakes. So there's a lot we can teach and provide and make people realize. And I want to go to those countries and help them make better decisions.
And when it comes to ocean protection, this is a question from Linda. When it comes to ocean protection, what's the most important or emerging thing to be doing today?
Well, there are many things. Ocean protection, how can you protect what you don't understand? There are tens of thousands of species in the ocean that we have yet to discover. How can we protect them if we don't know they exist? So I'm totally convinced today that we need to make sure we continue discovering. And that's why I tell you that my best dive is the next one, because I'm going to discover. But there are much better way, because we need to be able to go much deeper. And that's why, and I'm dreaming with the exosuit that Phil Newton in Canada with his team has created, where now I'm certified, but I haven't done it yet. You can go down to 1,000 feet in 5 minutes. You can spend 10 hours and you can come back in 5 minutes, because the air you breathe is continuously recycled. You're on your own. You can propel yourself. You have 2 propulsion, vertical and 2 horizontal. And with your right leg, you can move forward, left, right. With your left leg, you can go up and down. And your hands are free through a system that protects you. You can take species and you can remove your hands inside, make sure you have what you need. And if you want to take notes, for example, and go on. And that's one way to explore and discover many species within 1,000 feet. But we need to go much deeper than that to see a lot more what's down there. And there are many, many, many species that are being discovered by the scientific community on a regular basis. And we need to do that. And that's exciting for us as a species to look forward to discover the ocean.
Well, we have a few more minutes for some additional questions. And here's one from someone asking whether the belugas and orcas that we worked to free in Russia are being tracked. Is anyone tracking what's happening? So I might just mention in response to that, that we have been quite involved over these last month and a half, because a number of the beluga, the last ones that were released not where they were captured, but about 100 miles away from where they were being held in Shrednaya Bay. And that was not where they were from. So some of those belugas have been seen over these last few weeks and months visiting various harbors. And a few of them have been, 2 or 3 that we know on video, and we're seeing at least 2 or 3, and it could be more, are being seen approaching humans. They've approached boats and the like. So one of the things that we've done, we've worked with our beluga expert, Catherine Kinsman, who is in Canada, in Nova Scotia, who has developed protocols for when lone belugas, often young males, come into harbors, how people, as Jean-Michel said a few minutes ago, need to understand not to reach out and touch them, not to feed them, not to stick their hands near their mouths and the like, even when they look like they're being friendly. So Jean-Michel created a PSA that was translated into Russia, a public service announcement that's been sent to them. With Catherine and Ingrid Visser from New Zealand, we've created a set of guidelines and sent those, and those have been translated into Russian and are being distributed among the beaches and on the shoreline, so people can be educated about the need to leave these animals alone. So that group is being tracked. Some of the stories are not good. This is not a positive outcome of that, but hopefully it's only a few animals. Others of the orca and beluga that were released to the far north are being tracked, and to our knowledge, they're doing well. So we're trying to keep an eye on this. We're urging the Russians to do more research. And certainly if we had the chance, we would continue to provide this kind of education. So I don't know, Jean-Michel, whether you want to add anything to that as well.
Well, I want to compliment the Russian government and their people in the industries or in the scientific side to have contributed to recommendations of several representatives of different parts of the world, whether it's New Zealand or the United States or France or whatever, who got together and sat down with these experts in Russia, and we are there to help. And if we can reach out further, we're there to do that. And thanks to the foundation will not stop until we all, in government, in industries, in different countries, understand what needs to be done. It's in the best interest of every one of us. They need to know that. Everybody needs to know that. It's in our best interest. And thanks to, as I mentioned, the communication revolution, we can show behavior of these creatures that we've never seen before, because we didn't have that equipment before, but today we do. And we can put it on big screen in 3D or on your computer or whatever. There's huge opportunities we never had before to learn and explore, and particularly for people who are away from the ocean because they have no opportunities to have the same privilege that I have, for example, to go in the ocean. We want to share it with them. They are the decision makers. Every human being can make a difference.
And certainly as we look ahead to when we have a whale sanctuary open in Nova Scotia in Port Hilford, one of the things that we are doing is creating an interpretive center nearby. And we'll do the same, just as you're talking, underwater cameras, above water cameras, video, and be able to broadcast about what the whales are doing on their own, how they're choosing to spend their time, how they're living in a sanctuary. And we can even broadcast back to a marine park that used to have whales in captivity and show how they're living in a sanctuary. We can do that in schools. So all of these tools allow us to educate people about how animals live in the wild. Critter cams are everywhere. We can be doing this more and more with cetaceans.
Well, you know, my dream, very simple, is to have 9 vessels, not big ships, vessels that have the right kind of divers all over the planet ocean, and from underwater, broadcast via satellite to anywhere on the planet in any language what we see, and answer questions where people can speak to the divers who are down there at that time. We've done it. It works. We can do it again and again and again.
Indeed. More than that to do. We've got a number of questions from that are very similar. One from Chelsea, another one from Jeff. What can we do to stop the shows that are taking place in marine parks in the United States, places like SeaWorld?
Well, we can make a deal with them where we go underwater, we broadcast, and they're visitors asking us questions. And they'll learn a lot more than looking at creatures that are in jail.
Well, I think what we're seeing, and you've talked about it as well, the movie Blackfish in many respects opened people's eyes to what's taking place in marine parks.
Yeah.
And that has caused a tremendous change in opinion. So places like SeaWorld have had people vote with their feet where they're no longer attending and their attendance has declined. People have stopped buying the stock and their stock prices have declined. So as public pressure comes on parks like that, whether it's parks in the US, in Canada, elsewhere in the world, it's public pressure that will change how they operate. And so I think that's not so much what we can do, it's what all of us collectively can be doing to bring about change. And as Jean-Michel said earlier, not to point fingers. It's not the case that the people who are caring for those animals in those parks are doing something out of ill will. They care as deeply as we do about all of those animals. And as a result, what they're looking for is their education is different and they're working for a commercial company. So now they have an opportunity as we move forward with a sanctuary to do something different. And we look forward to working with them, not working against them as they move whales into sanctuaries.
You know, CV, we're living a very exciting time right now because particularly in this country, in the United States, where with COVID-19, you have everybody is supposed to be at home. And if you go out, you wear a mask and you cannot go to school and on and on and on. Do we like that? Do we want to continue that way? Is that the best way to look forward to the future? No. People want to go out, they want to explore, they want to sense, they want to feel, they want to ask questions, they want to discover. And that's why these places can adapt to all those needs that we have as individuals to discover the world we have the privilege to be in.
We have another question here from Kathy about whether we're Ocean Futures Whale Sanctuary Project involved with trying to help the southern resident killer whales, the orcas in the Pacific Northwest. So certainly you've been there and done film about them and certainly tried to provide education about them. And we've had the opportunity with our team that's based in Washington State with Jeff Foster and Katie Foster to try to be helpful as much as we can. And another question we had earlier from someone was about a southern resident, the whale that's known as Lolita in the Miami Seaquarium, and was asking if anything can be done to help her. So I might just mention that the Lummi First Nation tribe in Washington State is working quite diligently right now on an approach legally to bring the whale known as Lolita that they've named Skelly-Shakpinaw, a Lummi name for her, to bring her back as an ancestor because they believe they and the whales are family and they're working to bring her back, and we are assisting in that effort to develop protocols for them. So certainly as these different projects come up, whether it's Russia, whether it's the Pacific Northwest or elsewhere in the world, with the experience that Jean-Michel's team have, the Whale Sanctuary Project's team, we have to help. And so every chance we can, while keeping our focus on our core mission of creating this sanctuary in Port Hilford, we will do everything we can in all of these areas. So certainly keep the questions coming to our websites. We won't be able to answer them all, but you can certainly write to Jean-Michel. You can write to me on the whalesanctuaryproject.org or Jean-Michel on oceanfutures.org. We need your help, of course. We want your involvement. Where you can donate, when you can, of course, that help is also welcomed. So someone's asked where you get your shirts, Jean-Michel. They're asking about mine too, but they want to know how they get a shirt like yours. Everywhere you go, you find shirts and ties like whales.
I have found shirts often in Hawaii. You know, it's amazing because in Hawaii they have beautiful shirts, but they have shirts that are beautiful everywhere. And so mine is whales. I wanted to come with another one with orcas, and I have many ocean shirts, but of course, it's not just dolphins and whales. It's octopus and crabs, and there are many ways to be decorated to honor what we all depend upon, which is the diversity of nature and the beauty of it, which we want to share ourselves with people.
Well, the good news about the fact that we can wear these shirts is we're not having to wear our orca and beluga ties. So it's good not to have to wear a tie today. We can wear open shirts. So we're glad to be able to do that.
I have one.
As do I. I can't keep up with Jean-Michel in terms of ties and shirts, but I do what I can. We've got questions here from people we know well from our Norfolk, Virginia days. We've got Sandy Bond and Ann Carroll writing in. And Sandy's asking, these are two women who are just tremendous members of our team going back 40 years and who worked with us in the office in Norfolk, Virginia. And Sandy's asking, how can individuals get involved with our organizations? So how can people get involved with Ocean Futures?
They can become members. It's completely free, particularly in the United States. I don't know about the legal aspect, but when we started having members, when I created Ocean Futures in '79, after my father passed away, I said, I don't want children to say, Mom, Dad, I want to be a member, but you have to pay $25 or whatever. I said, no. So Ocean Futures membership is free, and anyone can become a member. They can ask us questions, and we try to answer all those questions, whether it's Carrie Bandaha or Charles Vinick or myself or you, Charles. We have many people trying to answer the question. Lida Pardici also is doing it, and Holly Lohais. I mean, a lot of people of our team, even if they're not in the office, they continue to help. And that's what we can do with our membership. And of course, there are times of the year, like at the end of this year, where we ask members, hey, if you want to help us because here are the projects we want to put together, they can help us. And a lot of people do, but it's not mandatory because we wanted children to go on their website and become members.
And we on the Whale Sanctuary Project welcome all of you as well. And certainly signing on there, following us on Facebook and Instagram, following in every way, everything we're doing. So certainly we would hope you'd follow us, you'd join with us, and carry the message. Carry the message of whale sanctuaries to everyone you know and the need for the ocean to be protected. So we've gone a good bit over time. We want to thank all of you for joining with us. We haven't answered all your questions. We'll try certainly to do so if you send them into either of our websites. We'll certainly be responsive. And please continue to follow what we're doing. And we thank you all very much for joining us.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you, everybody. Protect the ocean and you protect yourself.
Thanks again. Bye now.